Hi, welcome to Kristen Keeps It Real. Today we are with casting director Amanda Lenker Doyle. Thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely.
And inviting me into your lovely home.
Yes.
And I'm so excited to talk with her because she is a casting director that moved from LA to Atlanta, and she is now Atlanta based. And I wanted to find what her feedback is about this new wave, like what is happening to the industry.
I'm going to be honest, we moved because of the pandemic. We lived in LA for 14 years and, it was just a crazy time when all of this went down and started. With my, I had done 3 films right before everything shut down. We had finished shooting 3 films. Mm-hmm. And then everything just stopped. And so, we were everyone was just like, okay. And we're like, well, it's going to be 3 weeks. And, and here we are. Yeah.
Moving.
It's 2 years into it, which at a certain point I was like, oh, it's possible that this is going to go on for a really, really, really long time. And so we made the decision to leave in October of 2020, sold our house and just left. Yes. And we went to my in-laws for a little bit, and then we had friends that were looking at Atlanta because they have family here. I have family here, and my family, to be honest, has been come to Atlanta. There's production here. It's happening for years.
Yes, for years.
Yeah, for years. My mom's in Florida. I'm from Ohio, so they wanted me on this side of the country, and for years they've been like, you should see how much is shooting here. I'm like, okay. And one of the first projects I did was, as an assistant, a young assistant, was The Walking Dead. And so, I'm hearing it, I'm knowing it, I'm seeing it happening in the background. But we were in Colorado, and we were looking, with the friends that moved here, we were talking about Boise, we were talking about Seattle because we could work in Vancouver. Oh. We were talking about Portland because Portland's beautiful, but ultimately they landed here because of their family, and we were like, let's go look at it. So we drove here, we looked around for 2 days, and we were like, okay, this is great, we'll just do it. And we just left because we had no idea. We really didn't know if it was going to work or not, but there was nothing, we had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
Because we left,
Yeah.
And so we left, we landed here, and it took less than 3 weeks for Devin to get his first job.
Wow.
Huge movie with a DP that he had worked with in Los Angeles.
Oh my gosh.
Brought him on as a second unit DP and camera operator. And he just started working nonstop. My husband is a DP camera operator. And since he started rolling, I started, indie films started calling, and in LA I did a lot of television.
Yeah.
But and here I'm hoping to get back into being the regional casting director on some of those local shows, the shows that are shooting here. But in the meantime, I've been doing all this indie film work, which is really wonderful because I had done the 3 movies right before everything shut down. And then it's kind of rolled into this really interesting indie film career, which I've actually always wanted.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I love television.
Yes.
I came up in television. I learned from television. And honestly, television is where you learn.
Yes.
Because it's
fast.
Yeah.
It's moving.
And it's here's how you do it. Here's what you do. And I'm grateful to have learned in the television space as opposed to the indie film space, because now I can use some of the things that I've learned from my time in TV in the indie film space, which is completely different.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm very excited about the projects that I'm working on right now.
Can you talk about any
I'm
of
really
the
grateful. Of course, because it's not TV, so I can talk about everything. It's an indie film. So I am doing a film for my friend Juan Pablo Depache. He has written it and is co-directing it, and he's going to be in it. We're shooting it in Trieste, Italy, COVID pending, in February and March of next year. And it's a personal story for him. It's really lovely, and it's about his memory of his time as a teenager at this college called United World College in Italy. That kind of brings in all these international kids from all over the world. And he actually went there. And so we're shooting at the school that he went to.
Oh, wow.
And it's about him going there as a young Argentinian teenager and discovering himself and who he is and becoming who he was. And then we see him in 2019 because we're avoiding pandemic.
Love it. Nobody needs to see that anymore.
Nobody needs to see that. So we're seeing him in 2019. He's playing himself. And then we're seeing him as a 18-year-old going to that college and kind of realizing who he is.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
and
really...
I have a beautiful international cast like assembled so far, and with actors from Berlin and the UK and Argentina, and it's going to be awesome. I'm very excited about it.
Wow, that's awesome. And I assume you cast everyone digitally or online.
Virtually, yeah.
Virtually.
We have a virtual callback later today with all the young boys. We're mixing and matching. And yeah, everything's been virtual over Zoom, and that's, I would have done that if we weren't in a pandemic situation. True. You know what I mean? Because we want authentic actors coming from the place that we're saying they come from in the film. So, it would have been a virtual situation regardless. And I will say that leading up to the pandemic, Chrissy and I, when we did Wayne, we brought Mark McKenna over from Ireland, and all of his original auditions were self-tapes, and it was all virtual. So, and opening it up, and we had our community had been basically adopting this like openness to having people self-tape for things as we've evolved over time, because it gives us the opportunity to consider more people for a part. Mm-hmm. So for like Wayne, we saw like 1,000 people for Wayne, just for that role, because it was really specific, and we wanted to do our due diligence and see everybody to make sure that we had the right person. That's amazing. First of all, it has a 100% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It had a 100% rating. I was like, is this for real? That's so exciting. I know. It was awesome. That's so exciting. And so you did a really good job if that was the case, and then you had 1,000 people. Do you actually watch all the videos, or do you stop after 30 seconds? Okay, please be honest with us, because us actors, we put in so much time and work, and we're I wonder if the casting director is just going to stop after the sleep. Okay. I'm going to be honest. Okay. Please be honest. Okay. Because Kristen keeps it real, right? So Amanda's going to keep it real. I am. And I am honest to actors about this. So here's the thing. We don't watch we don't watch the whole tape if we know you're wrong in the first 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. Okay? It also depends on the scene. Mm-hmm. So if we know that the scene is really we're not going to really see what we need to see until we're at 45 seconds in, we'll watch to that mark where we know if they can make this turn, they're worth continuing to watch. Ooh. Okay? Or that you open your mouth at the beginning and we're just she's completely wrong. She's completely wrong. So we're going to move on. Because the reality of the day is, if it's a 3.5-4 minute scene or scenes, for Walking Dead, there were 10-minute scenes. Okay. Oh my gosh. So if it's that long, I know you guys are putting all of that work in, but if it's that long and I'm considering 1,000 people, think about time in regard to that, and time management for me and time management for you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's just no way to physically watch 6,000 minutes of of scenes if they're not right away. Yeah. But what if there's someone who's they're interesting, or maybe their choice is wrong, and do you ever put them on a short list, or think of them? So I'll watch somebody and be okay, she's completely wrong for the role of Sarah, making a name up. But she's really great for this other project I'm working on for the role of Kristen. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just make a note to myself, throw her tape in another. There's a lot of media management right now too, because we're receiving all these self-tapes. There's a lot to do in regard to media management, but I'll throw your tape somewhere else so that I remember it. I'll make a note for myself, and then I'll go back and watch the whole thing. Maybe I'll send that tape to my producers on that one and say, hey, she just read for this one. And she's not right for this one, but she's really right for Kristen. And they'll watch that and say, great, she is right for Kristen. Do you want to have her read for Kristen? Or maybe we'll just offer it to her. Oh. That happens a lot. Does it? That happens a lot. Oh my gosh. We save tapes. We show producers old tapes all the time.
Wow.
all the time.
That's really good to hear.
Yeah, so if you're doing good work and you're like putting a lot of effort in, and then you're hearing me say, "Oh, I didn't watch the whole thing. I maybe didn't watch." I'm going to start over and say that again clearly so that you can understand it. I might not have watched the whole thing in consideration for that role, but I will clock that you did a nice job and save it to show to somebody else later for something else in the event that we're in a time crunch or whatever.
I love that.
And that happens a lot. Yeah.
Do you think that it's actually a blessing for actors to now have the ability to self-tape?
Honestly, I do. I'm looking at our setup here. We're at 3-camera setup. And it's a lot of tech for you guys.
A lot of tech.
It's a lot of things to learn. It's a lot of things to get right. It's a lot of things to consider. And especially when we're receiving tapes that are dark, or we can't hear you, or we can't see you properly, or,
Does that happen?
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yes. The sound is really bad. There's airplanes or traffic. And I understand there's restrictions, and sometimes...
Especially if you live in New York.
100%. Oh, New York is always like, there's horns in the back of every audition in New York, and it's fine. But, it is complicated for you guys to wrap your heads around and figure out what the best setup is for you, what the best background is for you, like what services you the best on camera. But the opportunity that it presents far outweighs like the small technical things that you have to just work out and figure out for yourselves.
Right.
And we all have, like, we're recording on 2 iPhones here, so we've got, and a real camera, but we've got the technology literally in our pockets to do what we need to do. So, I would, if you're struggling with the tech, I would recommend reaching out to a friend who can do it, anybody else, who can help you get your tech set up, because once you're available to self-tape and always available to self-tape, you're going to open yourself up to a lot of opportunity. And that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Getting the opportunity and seizing that moment and that opportunity, and taking the opportunities as they come, because what did I say to Devin the other day? You miss 100% of the opportunities you don't take, or whatever.
That's
true.
I mean? That's true. So, okay, for example, like, I've never wanted to stay in LA, but I was like, I have to be here if I'm going to be an actor. Like, I have to be here.
Yes.
I'm from the South. My husband's from Oregon. We're used to a lot of land. So the pandemic was actually a blessing for us, because we wanted to raise our children with lots of land and things like that. But I'm still in a Mecca. Do you think that people in different states could also have the same opportunity, or would you recommend them moving to...
I just hired an actor out of the middle of Ohio for a big movie with John Hamm and Tina Fey.
Did you hear that?
She's awesome.
Wow.
And she self-taped. I was working with Susan Shopmaker on a movie, and it shot in New Mexico. She self-taped, and she was so strikingly interesting and different than anybody else that we saw. And they went for her.
Oh my gosh.
And she's from the middle of Ohio.
And did she have an agent? Like, how did she get this job?
She was with a big manager. She didn't have an agent, just a manager. But she got the job because she was really interesting.
Oh my goodness. And I'm so glad you said that, because I was on your Instagram, obviously. I follow you. And I saw on one of your stories where you posted, if I can remember correctly, you posted something about Squid Game and how, like, they were all nobodies.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Nobodies in the sense that nobody...
The thing about the pink, pink and red, everyone can't tell what color they are.
No.
Yeah.
Not that one.
Colorblind.
No, but like U.S. citizens or nobody knew who these people were. But the story was so good that people are willing to watch people that are not famous in our eyes because of the story.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with you on that, except I have been told by agents, by managers, they're like, oh, well, like, especially in pilot season, you don't have enough credits, or they're looking for a name. Like, how do you... It's hard. And I guess I don't know what the question is in that.
I know.
But it's just kind of like, well, how do we get that opportunity?
Like, I hear your frustration in that. and everybody's frustration in that. And that is like, oh, they need a star for the lead. And I will say, it kind of like, I'm going to be really honest, it goes across the board, because when I was coming up in younger offices who are very established now and working, the office that I was with when we hired you, they were young. They were young in their careers when we hired you. And when you're young in your career, they sometimes won't give you the bigger pilots because they think the legacy casting directors will be able to get the stars for them. The general sentiment in television has been historically that you need someone famous to lead your show for eyeballs. And that's the whole idea about like, having a social media following and having, 1 million followers on Instagram. The thought process or the idea that that's going to bring eyeballs to the project. We've learned that it doesn't necessarily matter. We've learned that. But they still think that effort is necessary, right? It's an indie film too. Sometimes the financiers will say, look, we can get this much money for this person in this market. So we need you to attach an actor of this caliber in this genre to get the money you need to make the movie. And so that exists still.
Yes.
Juan Pablo's movie is independently financed. It's completely financed. And so I've had the opportunity to just cast it with good actors.
Yes.
And that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
To just hire wonderful actors and not have to worry about the whole, financing contingency of it all.
Yes, which also brings me to the fact that you just recently cast Fake Famous.
Yeah.
Fake Famous. And how you could, what exactly, how do you cast that?
That was, so Chrissy's really good friends with Nick Belton.
Okay.
The writer and who kind of put the whole thing together is the filmmaker in regard to that, and was kind of doing a social experiment. And so, he was like, hey, Chrissy, they know each other from living in New York, and he was like, can you help me find people to participate in this social experiment? And so that was a very different situation because we weren't necessarily looking for actors. We were looking for real people who wanted to participate in a social experiment.
Yes.
And so that's kind of what that was. We just did an open call and had kids come out and tell us about themselves.
Well, that's what I mean, was like these people who were on social media and they bought followers, and next thing you know, they're getting free stuff. And like you said,
only one of them though.
One of them did.
The one that leaned into it.
Oh.
Like the other two were like, this is not for me.
Oh.
Right? And it didn't take for them.
Oh.
Now, did you the two boys were like, not for me.
But it just even goes to show that like, if you follow that path or whatever, you can get stuff for free. But at the end of the day, like, are you going to be worth watching just because you have followers?
Yeah, it's not. And you can buy followers. So there's the other level to it is that just because you have 45,000 followers doesn't necessarily mean that they're authentic, like real human followers. They could be bots that you bought or somebody bought for you, which we saw in Fake Famous. So that is why the idea that like, somebody who has 100,000 followers on Instagram is going to bring eyeballs to this project, and that's why we need a social media star or whatever, probably more than 100,000 to be considered a social media star, to be in our scripted film or television project doesn't necessarily translate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever found talent on TikTok or Instagram?
No one that's ever panned out. I mean, Chrissy and I did a show called Zach and Mia that's on Hulu.
Yes.
And it's a lovely show. And we did it with Awesomeness. And so, they're kind of, the way Awesomeness works is they have like an in with those kids. So they basically sat Kian in the part of Zach. And they were like, let's use Kian Lal. And I'm going to be honest, Chris and I were like, is he a good actor? Because this requires someone to be a really good actor. And he is so good. He surprised us. He did a really, really wonderful job. We cast Annie Winter and like the rest of them. But like, that was a really specific situation because Awesomeness was producing the project. Mm-hmm. But everybody else since then that I've like looked for on TikTok, or I come across someone who I think is really engaging or whatever, and I ask them to read. If they're not actors, they're just somebody on TikTok who looks, has like a great look or whatever, and
really good at doing their own stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it hasn't panned out. But I will say that I use social media to vet/learn more about actors that I am considering. So while I don't care about how many followers you have, I am saying like, oh, we just read, for instance, in Romeo and Juliet, that went to our hashtag Sundance. Chrissy was in New York with Tate he was doing a show in New York. And so she did a session in New York for us while I was doing sessions in LA for Romeo and Juliet. This was like literally October of 2019.
Oh, wow.
We shot that in February of 2020. I know. Crazy. But she had a session in New York and she met Francesca. And then when we were doing the callback session in LA, our director, Carrie, was like, have you guys seen her Instagram? And we're like, actually, no. Like, we didn't even think to like look at it. And he was like, look at her Instagram. And she was so right for the part that Carrie had written. And like, you know what I mean? Like the part that was like in the script, like she was an artist, she was a painter, like Francesca was a painter.
Yes.
And Juliet was a painter in the film. And her art, like the way she presented herself on social media, which was an authentic representation of who she was so right for the role.
Oh, I love that.
That our review collectively of her social media profile really, in addition to her auditions, got her the job.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because then now it's not about like, I will say like I went through this huge phase. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a 60-day challenge and I'm going to do a reel a day. That was exhausting. Yeah. I am a mother.
Yeah.
I have, I mean, even just to edit one of those videos takes like 3 hours. Right. And I think, and after a while I was like, I do not want to be an influencer. I want to create my art. Do I like making people laugh? Yes.
Yeah.
But like, I am not, I used to have this idea, and I think a lot of actors do, that like, as an actor now you have to have this huge following because it's important. It's like being, like if you can't be a star or have a name, then you should do your social media up like big time and have all these followers. But at the end of the day, it's like, it's not really my purpose.
No, it's a completely different thing. And if it brings you joy, then great.
Yes.
But if it feels like a chore that you're doing to satisfy, CBS wanting somebody with 600,000 followers, then that's not the right reason to do it. You know what I mean? And that's not obviously going to get you $600,000 either, because people, even non-casting professionals can smell inauthenticity.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I will say though, like I started having some casting directors following me after do that, and I was like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I got my product, because what I wanted to do was create an emotional impact. Like I want to make you laugh, right? But at the end of the day, it was just like, it was a lot of work, because I'm also doing Kristen Keeps It Real every week, and it's just, it was a lot. But that makes me feel a lot better to know that, okay, so actors, we can focus on like I'd rather spend those 3 hours in acting class than 3 hours editing.
Well, doing something that just isn't authentic to you and doesn't feel right to you. I mean, there are other venues to make people laugh. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to do something that doesn't necessarily feel authentic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I actually have a few questions from some Kristen Keeps It Real.
Oh, that's exciting.
People.
Okay.
Fans. Subscribers.
Yes.
Okay, so I got one from a working actor.
Okay.
And he says, in both the commercial and theatrical worlds, I noticed like 5 to 10 years ago, pins and avails were virtually bookings. You'd almost always book them. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. It's like they've been downgraded to callbacks. In other words, our callbacks, at callbacks, there seems to be a lot of people. Interestingly enough, callbacks have like a similar thing. I don't exactly how. No, okay.
Okay.
It used to be 2 to 3 actors called back out of at least 10 original reading. I remember that too.
Yeah. I see what you're saying.
Right? There used to be only like 2 or 3 people, and then you go to a callback now and there's like 20 people, and you're like, what?
Yeah.
Now it's at least 5 called back. Why the change? Why so many folks now put on pins, avails, and callbacks, and before not so much, like 2 to 3 choices?
He's saying there are 2 to 3 choices before?
Yeah. Like, for example, okay, so I just got pinned for a TV show, and then I was like, oh, for sure, I'm going to book this, because back in the day, when I would get a pin, I always got booked.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But now it's like, oh, wait, I have been released?
Yeah. Okay. That's a two-part question.
Yes.
And I'll start with why are there so many people being called back? Because there's so many people being called back because we're considering way more people, because we're able to consider more people now because of the way we're doing things. Commercially, I started in the commercial space, actually. I was used to seeing 150 people a day, like 200 people in a day for a commercial. Yes. And then calling back 35 people for one role. You know what I mean? And that's that was back in like 2006. So, commercially, we're seeing that many people, calling that many people back, 15, 20 people for a part, and then usually pinning or putting 2 people on a veil.
Oh, okay.
2 or 3 choices on a veil. There's like a first choice and a backup usually. And then somebody books it. And we don't tell you if you're a backup.
Yes, see, I would love to know if I'm a second avail or a third avail. We don't want
to do that because here's what happens. They send it to the client and the client's like, I like the third choice. And then you are out there looking for another job, potentially booking something else, and you're going to get it. And you just don't know. So everyone's just pinned, and then we release the pins. We try to remember to release the pins, and your agents are good about saying like, hey, can we release the pin? We've got something else. Yes. But that is what happens there because we don't ever put like 5 people on a veil for a commercial or for a theatrical project. That's not something we do.
Okay, good.
If you're on a veil or pinned, you're usually amongst 1 or 2 others.
Okay.
Okay. Theatrically, it's only 1 other typically. Sometimes theatrically, you're the only one. Okay. It just depends. But commercially, that's why, because there's another level of approval, and theatrically there is too. In television, the studio has to approve, the network has to approve, and then we can hire you. So commercially, typically the ad agency producers and the production producers and the director are in the session. So they've all approved of our choices, and they have to send it to the client. So if it's Coca-Cola has to sign off. Okay. So there's levels of approval that we're pinning you before we're getting final approval from like the most important people who are approving. Okay.
I got it.
So you don't know, we don't know if they're going to say, we like the second choice, or we like this person better with this person. Yeah. And so we have to just put everybody on hold until we know what they're going to say. And I will say psychologically, like typically, I would say 75% of the time, they won't go with the choice of the director and the agency and the physical production producers.
Wow.
Because they like to have a say. Yeah. So sometimes there's psychology involved in like how we present choices too.
Yes. So do you like present the person that you least want? Be like
sometimes. Sometimes.
That's good to hear.
Depends on who we're dealing with and what we're dealing with. And then that's the other thing is like we have an idea of who we're dealing with. So you have to trust us to kind of help you get the job, even if it's a backwards way of helping you get the job. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So that's that part of it. What was the second question? The question? Like the reason we have so many callbacks. Oh, yeah. And then like the pins. Yeah. So that's pretty much why we're pinning people. And, and sometimes theatrically, we have reads. Theatrically in television, I would say we read like in the olden days. I don't know what we're doing now that we're in the virtual space, but we would read like 15 to 20 actors for a role, and then we would send 7 to 10 to our producers to choose. And then if they weren't in the session, we send them on tape, and then they pick 1 or 2, and sometimes they just pick 1. They're like, I just like this one. We're like, okay. And we send that one up for approval. And if they're approved, great. If they're not approved, sometimes they don't approve people because that actor is going to be in an episode of a show that's going to air right before our show.
Oh.
That's another reason you wouldn't get approved, okay? So let's say Blackish and the Muppets aired.